Hi, good afternoon. I'm Edward Nawotka, the international and book-selling editor of Publishers Weekly. We are the main international trade magazine based in New York City. I'm here at the Madrid Book Fair 2022 in Retiro Park in Madrid, Spain. And we have a really unique opportunity to interview a top American business personality and thinker who happens to live in Valencia. I'd like to introduce Hiatt, who's the author of a book that was published in November last year by HarperCollins called Bet on Yourself. Yeah. And she's got a great story to tell just about her own career development, a little bit about how to advance your own career, and how to think about yourself as an individual in the workplace, but to maybe get the most out of all that time that we spend working for other people, and also learning how to bet on ourselves, how to work for our own benefit and for our own gratification satisfaction.
That is an excellent summary. Thanks for having me, Ed.
Ann?
Yeah, it's really good, really good.
Good. It's pretty hot here.
It is hot here, but it's a beautiful day in Madrid. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome.
It's my first time at the book fair here.
And what do you think so far?
Very impressed.
Yeah. It's a really, really big event. We're really happy to have so many book lovers here, even on a Wednesday afternoon. Yeah. It's a surprise and a delight. So,
it's a good energy here.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
Now, you live in Valencia, Spain, but you're American. Is that correct?
Correct. I've been in Valencia for about 4 years.
Okay.
The short version of that story is I married a Spaniard. And so after I decided to leave Google, I worked there for 12 years. I was looking to reinvent myself and look for new challenges for myself, make a big bet on myself. And it was about that time that I got engaged to a Spaniard and decided Spain would be the next chapter in my journey. So.
Well, I'm sure Spain is happy to have you.
I'm enjoying it.
Exactly. The occasion of our being here is your book, Bet on Yourself. For those who are unfamiliar with it or may have not even heard of it until this moment, could you give us a short précis about what the book is about and what you're trying to communicate to people?
Yeah. My book is my attempt to consolidate a playbook of best practices that I've learned across my first 15 years of my career at Amazon and Google. I worked for my very first job after graduating from undergrad was working directly for Jeff Bezos in 2002 at Amazon. This is a time when Amazon was not yet profitable. It was very contentious, learned really, really fast. It was like being thrown into the deep end of the ocean. I learned so much. That was my original business school. And then I moved to California to do a PhD at Berkeley and got recruited out of that program to work for Google, where I was for the next 12 years. So my book, Bet on Yourself, is my attempt to translate these best practices of these super performer CEOs that I've worked for the rest of us normal people.
Okay.
I believe really strongly in democratizing success, and so I really wanted to write something that could help anyone of any growth stage in their career, of any industry, and ideally anywhere in the world to make their biggest dreams come true.
Now, your proximity to Bezos gave you some insight into how somebody like that works. And we will often see in the media the 10 secrets of Jeff Bezos' success. And I'm going to guess that there are a lot more than 10.
Yeah.
I mean, is there when you think back on that time, is there one or two anecdotes that come to mind that you think really illustrate what made him or makes him unique and also your role, like somebody who is in the proximity to somebody, because often being able to recognize another person's genius, intellect, ability to execute, all of these things is equally as important as our own ability to do it ourselves. Because together we work, we can amplify what we can accomplish. And I imagine that you probably contributed somewhat to Jeff Bezos' own success too.
Well, that would be an exaggeration, but I hope I contributed something.
All right.
No, I did. I learned very, very fast. I was very young, but it was a great moment in time for me to join Amazon because although I was the youngest member of our team, everyone on the team, regardless of their seniority, were doing things every day that they had never done before. So it was a really safe, psychologically safe environment to experiment, learn really fast, and pivot. But I was a close observer. I knew very quickly it took me 9 months to get that job at Amazon. I interviewed 3 separate rounds.
And what was the specific job you had?
So my original title was just as an assistant. I was part of his support team.
Gotcha.
But very quickly, within a couple of months, my entire job description changed. I tell a story in my book of how I nearly killed Jeff Bezos within a couple months of working for him. Thankfully, that was not the end of that story or of my career.
I will not ask you to tell the story here. Exactly, because that's why we want to buy the book.
That's right. But because of that event, Jeff saw that I was really good under pressure. I could manage up to people very, very senior to my level. I could handle a crisis, think on my feet, and do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And after that moment in time, he started giving me projects that were far outside of my job description. So I really became this executive project manager for Jeff. And I watched him really closely about how he was managing his team. He was hiring senior executives who had expertise that was very unique in time. We were inventing systems and processes and technologies that had never existed before. Okay. And so to answer your question about some of those anecdotes that still stay with me now, I think the first one is most about how he built up his team. Mm-hmm. He was very, very thoughtful and careful about the team he assembled around him. Okay. Case in point, why it took me 9 months to get the junior most team, job in his team. But I think one of the most important things I saw him do was training up this level of executives to be able to think like he did, because he realized we were scaling so fast in 2002 that he knew that mission critical decisions were going to be made in rooms that he could no longer be in just because he didn't scale at the same pace as the company. So I saw him invent this role called the shadow. And the shadow's job was to literally be at his side 24/7, to read every email, to be on every flight, in every meeting, so that he could have a brain double, a sparring partner. So this person would have the full context of the information he had in his head. And then their job, which is terrifying for most people, was to challenge his favorite ideas, to see to poke holes in all his favorite ideas, see around those blank corners, and help him elevate his thinking.
Devil's advocate.
Exactly. Yeah. And that person, that very first shadow, was Andy Jassy. Okay. Now, Andy Jassy, in October, just 6 months ago, took over as his successor. He is now the CEO of Amazon. This is 19 years in the making of this training.
Now it makes sense, though, why that role would come to him, because he had spent all that time essentially being Jeff's doppelganger.
He did. And then he went on to run AWS, which when I was working there was just a glimmer of an idea, which now is a multi-billion-dollar subsidiary company. In fact, I just read an article this week saying if it was broken apart as a separate entity, it would be in the top 10 highest valued companies in the entire world.
Absolutely.
So I really watched how Jeff invested in his executives. People ask me all the time, what's a word I would use to describe Jeff Bezos? And my favorite word is relentless. In fact, here's a little Easter egg for our viewers. If you go to relentless.com, it still redirects to Amazon. He bought that way back in the late 90s because he wanted that to be at the core of who we are. Now, in that relentless environment, you would think that people burn out, but actually the average tenure of his direct reports is 19 years.
Okay.
So he is relentless in the way he manages you, but he invests equally in your development and your learning and training you. And that's what I really learned from him, was to be very choosy about the people who are around you, allow them the freedom to learn and run very, very fast, and give them that investment and guidance for the long run. Right. And that's how I've tried to run my teams since then at Google, and now in my consulting work. That's how I really coach my CEOs, especially those who are in this rapid scale stage of their growth, because I think that's a huge secret of the Amazon success.
It's leadership is what it comes down to. I mean, we undervalue that sometimes because we think brilliance or intuition or tenacity or hustle, but really knowing how to lead can really can really facilitate or catalyze an idea, because you can't do everything yourself, which is something he also realized as well.
Yeah, and this probably isn't the first word that comes to mind when people think of Jeff, but I really think he led with humility. Because to create someone's full-time job playing devil's advocate to you takes a lot of humility. Andy's job back then was to do that in front of everyone, in front of the company, in front of his senior executives, anyone in the room. He invited that scrutiny. Not only invited, he demanded it of everyone of every level. It can be very intimidating the first time you experience it.
Sure.
But that is how you get the best ideas and really accelerate your growth.
Well, often we have that in our partner or our spouse.
Yes.
We have that antagonist who's going to constantly push you to challenge your most accepted ideas.
It's true. Yeah. And I think a lot of the greatest leaders have a habit of this. For example, when Barack Obama became president, he and Michelle made a rule: no new friends. They needed those friends who knew them at their core, at their original most powerful man in the world status, because those people would tell them the truth.
They needed people to be real with them.
Exactly.
And you had to have a real somebody who weren't just going to be yes men, which is
Exactly.
often the risk when you become very successful.
Right.
Now, you went on to do you work on a PhD, which what was the subject of that going to be?
Not tech related at all.
Sure.
It was in, my undergrad was in international studies. My PhD was a continuation of that.
Okay.
I was studying the effects of membership in the European Union on social democratic states.
I see.
Don't use that in the way I intended now, but it really has been helpful because I didn't anticipate then going to Google.
Right.
We were running a rapidly expanding technology business, and most of my job was around policy and communications issues in the office of the CEO. So I used it in a way that I did not expect, but it has come in handy, actually.
Excellent. And tell me a little bit about your tenure at Google, which lasted 12 years. I mean, that's quite a tenure, actually. And you were there at a time also of rapid growth.
Yes.
And again, everybody's impression of Google is this is a very intimidating workplace where the stakes are very high, the expectations are very high, and the reward for success is very high, but failing also has consequences too.
All of that is true.
Okay.
But I really enjoyed it. I thrived in that environment.
Okay.
It actually took the recruiter 3 or 4 phone calls before I even agreed to be interviewed.
Wow.
Because I was really happy in my PhD program and they were trying to recruit me out of it and get me to leave something that I really valued.
Yeah.
The reason I agreed
Which
to
takes
it...
confidence and you have to make that
You
bet
did
on
have
yourself.
to. I had to make a bet on myself, and the reason I did, once he finally got me to come to campus, what sold me wasn't what I expected. I had heard these stories about the campus of free food and volleyball courts. You could bring your dog to work, all the perks.
Yeah.
Yes. But what sold me were the people.
Okay.
I found myself that first day at lunch sitting literally next to a former astronaut who had been to space.
Sure.
Someone who had ridden in the Tour de France with Lance Armstrong.
Gotcha.
And Vint Cerf, one of the original architects of the internet. That was my table. And whether that was by the recruiter's very savvy design or by chance, I don't know.
Oh, I don't think that was an accident. Yeah, no, this just doesn't happen.
It seems quite exceptional, but it actually is very representative of the people they had collected.
That level of people.
That level of people. And the reason why that wasn't an exception was they gathered what they called a band of misfits. You get innovative thought when you don't just have people with the same expertise, same background, same experiences, but they really hired for intelligence, passion, and drive.
Yeah.
They hired, in fact, when you interview at Google, you don't, I think even still today, it's not for a particular job title.
Right.
It's for those 3 factors, and then they'll figure out where to put you, because they figure smart people can figure out anything.
Repeat those 3 factors again?
Yes, so it was passion, drive, and what was the first one I said? It was like obsession.
Gotcha.
In fact, when you interview
Sort of
Google...
relentless.
Relentless, yes, relentless behavior. When you interview Google, one of the 5 categories you're scored on is one called googliness. That was always my favorite one to be assigned to evaluate.
Okay.
Googliness is where we're looking for that extra drive, that bias for action.
Like an X factor.
An X factor. And usually it's in something very quirky and unexpected. Everyone there has gone to exceptional universities, is highly smart.
Yeah.
So we're looking for something special. Did you climb Kilimanjaro? Have you, literally someone I interviewed was a world champion Lego 3D sculptor.
Sure.
That's googly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're looking for. So over the 12 years of my career there, I really reinvented myself in 4 different ways.
Yes.
And that's a lot of what I teach on Bet on Yourself is how to be an intrapreneur within an organization and then carry that on as an entrepreneur if you want. But being an intrapreneur is about taking the driver's seat of your career, having a conversation with yourself about what do I want to learn in this phase of my career? Because not enough people have that conversation with themselves.
No.
Once you know what you want to learn, what expertise you want to be known for, what stages you want to stand on, what types of teams you want to be leading, then you kind of can engineer serendipity. You can see these opportunities that otherwise might have passed you by. That leads you to the second thing, which I think was the biggest driver of my career in tech, which was I always sought out leaders that I not only liked, but I wanted to become like.
Right.
Whether that was my direct manager or not, I would seek them out so I could learn, how does she run that war room? How did he handle that press situation? What was it like collaborating with this speechwriter? I could absorb the best practices of these exceptional leaders that were around me. And that leads you to the third step of really reinventing yourself and being an entrepreneur, which is about disrupting yourself.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I over this 12-year period of my career at Google, I had these 4 phases because I realized I was getting a little too comfortable. And I would literally do the math. I would look at my calendar and I would evaluate how much of my day, what percentage of my day is fully within my wheelhouse. I'm in my zone of genius. I know all the answers. I've seen this all before. I am the one of authority. Once that got over about 80%, each person has a different percentage that's the right balance. But for me, once it was over 80%, I got itchy. I wanted something else. And so that's when you start volunteering for things outside your job description, letting your manager know of your growth goals, and looking for your next opportunity. And that leads to advancement every time.
Gotcha. So there are strategies. We shouldn't necessarily take our own competency as contentment, that we can still constantly improve and advance, even if we're in mid-career, for example.
Absolutely.
At what stage should we be doing this at each stage of our career, at the beginning, middle, and even later on when we find ourselves maybe in mentorship roles or in management, that where you're going to be in leadership roles, that you're at the sort of pinnacle of your career, because this is going to happen to people eventually too.
Absolutely. I think each of those 3 levels has an important element of how you can do this for yourself. In the beginning, it's a little bit more natural.
Okay.
So you start in something that likely your first job.
You have nothing at risk.
Yeah,
there's nothing at stake.
You're still learning. You're still figuring it out. And your first job probably doesn't resemble your dream job. So you're kind of innovating and looking for opportunities and being creative.
Yeah.
But then people get really complacent in the middle of their career. They kind of plateau.
Yeah.
And this is the big differentiator. This is when you need to really put yourself in the driver's seat, because until that point, there's kind of a natural progression. You've been here for a year, so they give you an evaluation. You're up for performance reviews and promotion cycles.
Yeah.
But in the middle, it's really up to you to look for that, ask for it, demand it, or seek it out in other ways, maybe in your community or through changing jobs or something. So that's where I think it's the hardest, actually, is in this middle plateau. Those people who want to own the big client account for the first time,
until
or become
that
a
point,
people
there's kind of a
manager,
natural
or
progression.
do
You've
the
been
code
here for
reviews,
years,
whatever
they
it
give
might
you an
be for you.
evaluation,
You
you're up
really
for
have to be
performance
very
reviews
proactive.
and
And
promotion
then
cycles.
the other
But
challenge
in
I
the
see is
middle,
when you're at
it's
the
really
top.
up to you
When you're at the top
look
and
for
it's
that, ask for it,
overwhelming and
demand
you're
it, or
running a million
seek it
miles
out
an hour,
in other ways.
it can
Maybe in
feel
your community
very,
or
what's
through
the word I want to
changing
use? It
jobs
can
or
feel
something.
self-indulgent.
So that's
to
where I
take
think it's
time
the
to be
hardest.
like, where do I want to go from here? And that
I just
requires.
had this conversation
Did you?
with somebody yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, I
And
think
they
it's
said
so
that
hard.
I had to stop and have a conversation over a glass of wine. They were negotiating the purchase of a $3 billion piece of equipment. And they said, wait, I could be spending my time better. It's like, no, sometimes you just have to slow down a little bit.
So much wisdom in that, because what you can't do is you can't have those really thoughtful bets on yourself when you're back to back to back to back, as most executives are. You're in a conference room for 15 hours a day. You're constantly on email. Your to-do list, it's bottomless. What you have to do is really step away. And this is another thing I saw modeled both by Jeff Bezos and Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, when I worked for them, was they were very thoughtful in protecting this time for reflection.
Yes.
This time for opportunities. So Jeff did it in a more extreme way. He did 1 week a month, 1 week every single quarter, where he would lock himself into a conference room or a hotel room, and literally it was a hotel room, not a conference room. You can't stay in a conference room for a week.
With a shadow or without?
Not without. This is one of the few times he was without a shadow. And he would bring nothing with him. The first 2 days were starving himself of outside stimulus. No newspapers, no phone, no conversations, nothing.
Yes.
And then after that, he had a blank Moleskine notebook, and he would just write unfiltered ideas. I literally, today, 19 years later, see Amazon launching things that were in those notebooks way back 15 years ago when I was there. That's how visionary it is. So that was his process of clearing his mind, allowing him to be creative and innovative and work on those crazy ideas.
Yeah.
Eric did it very differently, but it's a similar concept. We did listening tours. When he transitioned from being from CEO to executive chairman, we spent the first year doing a listening tour where we visited Google's global offices. We met with most influential people in science and medicine and policy and media, just to listen and see, where is technology going next? How can we anticipate problems that our users are going to have and solve those proactively? So that was, for him, it's kind of that concept of never eat alone.
Yeah.
When we're in a new city, we're meeting with
Simon
Sinek. I love it. It's gathering these chain makers. looking for people who are not only in your circle of influence with the same expertise and background from you, but being very proactive in seeking that out in what social scientists call your weak ties. These are people 2 or 3 steps removed from your immediate circle.
Okay.
And that's where really innovative ideas come from. And that's how he reinvented himself. I mean, Eric Schmidt had been CEO of 3 major organizations, including Google. How does he take that to a next level? You can't do that when you're back to back. He really had to do this tour, take in a lot of information, and put it together in a new way.
And it's simply just not healthy to keep living like that. I think anybody at a certain point, you realize you also need to prioritize.
Yeah.
The mindfulness is not just about your career, but it's about your health, about your relationships,
Yes.
about your family and your environment too. I mean, if we could all be a little bit more mindful of these things, I think the world would be a better place.
It's
ultimately.
very true.
Right.
I do have to acknowledge, like, I did this wrong for the most
Okay, fine.
major part of my career because it was early tech. It was moving fast.
Yeah.
18-hour days were not unusual. Coming in on Saturdays and Sundays was not unusual. No one asked me to do that, though.
Right.
The reason why I didn't burn out in that environment was because I was very purpose and passion aligned with what we were trying to do. I came in on a Saturday because I knew a war room was going on and I didn't want to miss it when they finally solved the problem.
Right.
So that's my advice, is like not to do the 18-hour days, but to seek out where are you going to learn what you value.
Okay.
Are you being surrounded by the leaders you want to be with? Are you disrupting your skills and anticipating that? That's how you future-proof your career, and that's how you prevent burnout, ironically.
And these are all things that we can learn. You have some. You also offer some tips and some best practices for applying this to your own life in your own book.
I
Is that
do.
correct?
Bet on Yourself is a compilation of this, of how do you take something in the beginning stage of your career and turn it into something that is passion aligned for how you want to show up in the world? How do you level up mid-career? And then how do you do what I call having a living legacy?
Yes.
This isn't something of, at the end when you get your gold watch after 50 years, you're then think about your impact in the world, but how do you live each day purposefully? And I'm not just talking about the people in tech. I know this might feel unattainable for some people, but there is a lot of opportunity to insert this passion-driven work,
Right.
Regardless of the opportunities in our immediate community, thanks to the internet, to opportunities in your community. There's really a beautiful extension, regardless of what your 9 to 5 might look like. There's more opportunities than it.
So we shouldn't take this as coming from, it's something derived from the tech world, but not just applicable to that tech world. It could be applied to anybody in any stage of their career.
Yes,
ultimately.
that was my goal.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And you do have a story in the book, which I think a lot of people can relate to at this particular moment in time, that your father was the inspiration for Goose in Top Gun.
He
Is
was.
that correct?
This is my claim to fame at a cocktail party. This
Okay.
gets attention. So I'm an Air Force brat. I
Okay.
was born on MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
My dad had just graduated from pilot training and was chosen against all odds to be a fighter pilot, and he was assigned the F-4 Phantom fighter jet.
Wow.
Soon after that, just before my first birthday, we were transferred to Alaska, and my dad spent his time paroling the airspace between the United States and the Russians during the dilettante period of the Cold War.
Sure.
While we were there, some movie script writers were researching a film, and they wanted to listen to how pilots talk to each other.
Sure.
There's a particular lingo, there's a particular
Banter.
jabbing. Banter is the word I'm looking for. And so they asked for permission to listen to the cockpit recordings. That script became Top Gun. And so they used the actual call signs of the pilots they were listening to, and my dad is Goose. My entire childhood was with Iceman and Maverick. I played with their kids. We lived in the same neighborhood. So that's my claim to fame. I am Goose's daughter.
And this story can be found inside the book.
It can.
Bet on Yourself, published by HarperCollins. I'm with Anne Hiatt, the author of the book. You can find this online. And Anne, is there a website where people can seek out maybe some more attention from you if they're looking for that, or just to reach out and tell you what they think and offer ideas?
I would welcome that, yes. So you can go to the book's website, which is betonyourselfbook.com, and there's links to all my socials. There's summaries of the book and core messages. There's ways to reach out and contact me if people are interested in speeches, or I do a lot of offsites and consulting for leadership teams.
Excellent.
So that's a great way to connect with me.
And I assume you're working on something else?
I am. I'm working on book number 2 right now, so watch
Excellent.
this space.
And we can, I know that the book has been sold, the rights have been sold to Russia and
China. In simplified Chinese, in Mandarin, in Russian, and several other Asian languages.
Not yet Spanish.
Not yet Spanish.
That's not on purpose?
I hope that will soon change.
Okay, well, we're going to reach out to some people here and see if we can find you a publisher here at the Madrid Book Fair 2022 at Oratorio Park. Thanks again for your time, Anne.
Thanks, Ed. This was really fun.
I'm Ed Nawotka from Publishers Weekly, and enjoy the rest of the fair, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks.